Have you ever noticed how every single James Bond film begins with a massive chase sequence? And it's not just James Bond either. Mission Impossible, Fast and Furious, Jason Bourne. And it's not just the franchises. One-offs like, I don't know, everything these days, at the very least, is created to have a sequel these days, right? Extraction, Lift, The Union, just to name a few I saw recently on Netflix. Well, why do they do that? I mean, for one, it's pretty obvious. It's to create a big first impression, to settle you as the viewer into the film. But how can they pull it off? Like, how can they just throw us in there and expect us to tread water? Well, basically, it's because the filmmakers assume we already know a certain amount about the world in which that particular movie is set. In fact, we do, right? But what if the creator assumes no knowledge of the viewer, or in this case, the reader, and the protagonist has no fucking idea? In fact, all the ideas he has about what to expect are totally wrong. Well, this is a no-spoiler review of James Clavell's Shogun. Volume 1, the book. Shogun is a novel by James Clavell published in 1975, or as you kids might say, mid to late 20th century. You probably know it. In fact, I only started reading it because of the TV show. Shogun is the third in James Clavell's 6-book Asian Saga, and chronologically, in the books, it's the first, as in, it's set the furthest in the past of the 6 books. And in and of himself, James Clavell is a really interesting person. He's an Australian-born, British-raised and educated, naturalized American who wrote, who screen-wrote. He was a director as well. He was a World War II vet, and he was a prisoner of war. He actually wrote the original The Fly, not the 1986 remake with Jeff Goldblum in it, not the late 20th century remake with Jeff Goldblum in it, but the original mid-20th century one in 1958. He also co-wrote The Great Escape with W.R. Burnett, starring the legendary Steve McQueen and Richard Attenborough, brother of David Attenborough. However, despite all of that, he's best known for his Asian Saga, the most popular of which is Shogun. Shogun is set in 1600s Japan, still feudal Japan, I think, and broadly speaking, accurately, although that's not to say it's inaccurate, but broadly speaking, accurately follows the historical tides of the time. The novel starts with our protagonist, who's an Englishman piloting a Dutch ship, running aground in a storm in Japan. Now, the world in which it's set, if you remember your history, I mean, I don't, but as it's portrayed in the book, colonialism is kinda in full swing. The Spanish and Portuguese have control of Central and South America, and they're guarding the route into the Pacific through the continent, also known as the Magellan Pass. You've probably heard of that, right? No Panama Canal back then. And they're guarding it from the English. The two sides, the English and the Dutch, the Spanish and the Portuguese, are separated by a common religion thanks to Martin Luther and Henry's habit of beheading his wives. So, suffice it to say, there's no love lost between the two sides. And there are rumors of a hidden empire, a mystical land of gold and treasure in the far, far east, the route to which is controlled by the Spanish and the Portuguese. Our protagonist is the first from the Protestant side to arrive, because he fucking crashed, in the land of the rising sun. You know how when you begin a new book or start a new game, right, there's a learning curve, kind of like a transition period as you learn the rules of the game or like get to know the universe in which the story is set. Because unlike in action franchises, there's usually no assumed knowledge. You can't just start in the middle of a chase sequence. I mean, some games do, but you know, people don't really know the rules except for like the rules of grammar and syntax and stuff like leveling up or item inventories. Like, now imagine you're beginning Deathly Hallows Volume 2 or starting Pokemon whatever. The world is already established to a point where it can all just begin in media res. And we don't need to be caught up because we know catch Pokemon, collect gym badges, kill Voldy. Like, remember the last Harry Potter film poster? It literally was just the date the film is gonna be released and the words, "it ends." Well, anyway, the technology gap at the time that Shogun was set was such that colonizing the next place, to put it very flippantly, was just a rinse and repeat sequel to colonizing the last place. They don't speak our language. They don't worship our God. They don't have cities like our cities. And crucially, they don't have guns. Eliminate or subjugate the people. Replace the leadership. Control the resources. Profit. Right? Rinse, repeat. There's no need to prioritize understanding their culture or their history because the gap in technology is so large and it's so easy just to like bulldoze them and exploit them. The greed and avarice is so demanding that right now, yes, right now, let's bulldoze, and then we'll do all that touchy-feely stuff later. But what if you come across a place you can't bulldoze? And as such, you have to play by the foreign rules of this strange land. Well, welcome to Japan, baby. I imagine it kind of like this. You're playing Pokemon, whatever. You're doing the usual catch Pokemon in the long grass, battle, you collect things, you collect like badges in Pokemon. It's third person, top down, kind of RPG, 2D game. It has pleasant but inane dialogue that's kid friendly, and you can play it in your own time. But then, all of a sudden, after the third gym, it becomes Doom. It becomes FPS, gory, sweary, fast paced. You can't look away. You gotta reload, I'm shot! The world our protagonist has known is a Christian world from the Judeo-Christian tradition. It has a Christian God, it has Christian values. In fact, even the countries his country is warring against is a Christian one. And the big bad of the time, in the Crusades, those raiders from the Far East and the South, those followers of Islam, well, broadly speaking, Islam stems from the Judeo-Christian tradition. Like, yeah, it's different religions, different cultures, kind of similar values and morals though. Kind of like cats and dogs are different, but ultimately they're mammals, or elephants and sharks are different, but ultimately they're still from planet Earth. And our protagonist, a ship pilot, has explored a lot. He's seen a lot, way more than the average person of his age. In fact, he is one of the explorers of the age. One of the few people on planet Earth, as much as they know of it, to have seen so many different places. And all those places were all colonies or being colonized. Western Judeo-Christian. Japan, on the other hand, is none of that. Totally alien. So anyway, given that I'll be doing 2 reviews of Shogun, because I've split them up, or I've split my reviews up into Volume 1 and Volume 2, because it's a doorstopper. It's a doorstopper. This video is going to be more like, kind of like an intro, high-level overview of the book. What James Clavell does so well with Shogun is bringing that precipitous cultural difference to life. Like really highlighting how different Japan is as a place. What a shock. Like a true worldview shattering culture shock, discovering that a place like Japan exists and having to live there, what that is like for the protagonist. We see the whole world through his eyes as he gets familiar with Japanese culture. When depicting other cultures, it's so easy, and I'm sure you've seen examples of it, to demonize or romanticize them, fetishize them. I mean, people do that a lot with Japan. Even sneer or look down on these other cultures. But how Clavell, I mean, it's not sympathetic, but how Clavell presents it is as close to an objective like presentation of Japanese culture we could wish for in a novel. Because the protagonist, because of the story, he's got to get to know, be cool with, and live in this culture, right? So the author, as the author, he has to show us the protagonist's journey to that point. And James Clavell does that really, really well. And it really isn't on the superficial level of murder is wrong, but it's more on the level of Christians believe murder is wrong because, which is because, which is because, which is because. Look, you will really get to know Japan because of Clavell. Even I, being half Japanese, feel like I've learned about myself reading this book. And it's not just Japan he is introducing us to either. Like Clavell is introducing us to this entire world of the 1600s of exploration and religious conflict, political tussling, etc., etc. And all of this to say that the world of Shogun, Shogun Volume 1, is very, very well created. Starting this book was daunting. It's 1,200 pages long. And like, I want to read 30 books this year. It's a goal. And I started in April, so I've got a really aggressive schedule. And so I've had to be really tactical in my book selection. I upload my reviews in order that I read the books, for the most part. So you can see how I've chosen my books, tactically. You can also follow me on Goodreads too. Here's the link. But having begun Shogun, it's a page turner. I don't know how much book time has passed, whether it's like a month or like a week or like whatever, but every page something happens and then something happens and then something happens again. It is so well plotted. It was very, very tempting not to stop after volume 1. But I've not done a no spoiler review in a while and like lots of live streaming reading Dracula. So I thought, let's break it up. So anyway, if you've enjoyed this no spoiler review, please like, share, subscribe, follow me on Instagram and Twitch. I'll see you all again soon with Looking for Alaska by John Green.